Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in the series of talks promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation. Every Saturday we meet at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And today I am so very happy to be here and host this talk by our very special guest, Luiz Villaça, who will be discussing Spiritist philosophy and science. But before we turn it to Luiz, I would like to do a short opening prayer. I would like to invite all of us who are here today to please close your eyes. Take this moment to open our hearts and our minds and link to the spirits of lights who are here with us today, along with our benefactors, our guardian spirits, our guardian angels who guide us during this journey on earth. May we all be blessed. May our dear, dear friend Luis receive the inspiration during this talk, and that all of us be touched by his words. So be it. Luis, welcome to our talk this Saturday. We hope you and your family are doing well. It is so good to have you here to discuss what I consider such an interesting topic, Spiritist philosophy and science. Luis will cover the path from the basics of philosophy and science to Spiritist science proper. He will also discuss the methodology, he'll discuss the approach by which Kardec codified the work. Thank you, Luis. And today, before we actually begin with his message, I would like to formally introduce him. Luiz Villaça is an electronics engineer with an MSc from Carnegie Mellon University and a Manchester University MBA. He is a worker at Grupo Fraterno, a Spiritist center in São Paulo, Brazil, where he works on the mediumistic meetings, and he also teaches there classes on Spiritism. Just a reminder, everyone, please take your time to understand that you can send your questions or your comments using the chat window. Luis has reserved some time and he will address any comments, etc. once he concludes his presentation. We'll have time for that. So with that, Luis, please go ahead and get started.
Good morning, everybody. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. Thank you, United States Spirit Federation, for this kind invitation. Today, we're going to talk about Spiritist philosophy and science. This is an interesting subject, and I ask you, please bear with me. Maybe the first half of this talk will not be that great, but we have to build knowledge, to build intellectual material so that we can go, prepared to the second part of it. I will use this first slide just to explain to you the layout of my slides. Whatever is between quotes in italic is the exact reproduction of the text referenced here. Whatever is, just in normal characters is either an elaboration on the contents or the presenter ideas, always aligned with the concepts of the Spiritist Federation. Bear in mind that sometimes the text shown here is not the exact word for word of the translation you are used to, because there are different translations. For instance, here it said all, while in this particular translation it say everything, but I try to do my best to have correct references and correct tests. Spiritist science. What is spirit science? It's a word coined by Kardec that essentially grounded in the philosophical and scientific aspects of the Spiritist doctrine that has been transmitted to us by several superior spirits and developed by Spiritism. Reading Kardec from the Spirit's book, word by word, from the introduction and conclusion, the Spiritist doctrine or Spiritism is based on the relationship between the material world and the invisible world, the latter being inhabited by beings known as spirits. Spirit science explains what has only been known in allegorical language, and it eliminates all that superstition and ignorance have created. Just a final note that I forgot to tell you. Sometimes, just to make sure that the translation is okay, I have to go to the French original regarding to the codification, just to check if the ideas we are transmitted are okay. And this might generate differences. So again, bear with me. Let's see what Herculano Pires has to say about Spiritist science. The spiritual revelation, according to Herculano Pires in his book Spiritist Science and its therapeutical implications, the spiritual revelation came by the Spirit of Truth, but the Spiritist science, the human revelation, was Kardec's work. He himself proclaimed this distinction and devoted body and soul to scientific work. According to Herculano Pires, Kardec had definitely broken the barriers of assumptions to establish on logical and experimental basis the principles of the admirable science of Descartes' dream and Francis Bacon's predictions. Here, he makes a reference to the debate between Descartes and Francis Bacon, rationalism against empiricism. And this debate is important because when they talked about that thing, the admirable science, science as we know it did not exist. Science, came about in the 19th century, the century of Kardec. This is, by the way, a photo of Herculano Pires. Herculano Pires passed away, discarnated on 79, but he wrote more than 80 books. Actually, Jussara Korngold, that I hope is watching, has translated books by Herculano Pires, notably Obsession, Passes, and Counseling. Anyway, continues Herculano Pires. Thanks to his ingenious vision, Kardec, which is the lonely man of Marty Street, managed to awaken the greatest scientist of the time to the reality of the Spiritist phenomena, today strategically called paranormal. He founded the Parisian Society for Spirit Studies as a scientific, not religious entity. He dedicated himself to exhaustive research and founded the Spiritist Review, recently being published again by the International Spiritist Council, and that's fantastic, for wide and systematic dissemination of the results of such research. We now know about the tripod of Spiritism, philosophy, science, and religion. And Kardec, in What's Spiritism, tells us that it is simultaneously a science of observation and a philosophical doctrine. According to Kardec, Spiritism is a science that deals with the nature, origin, and destiny of spirits, and their relation with the corporeal world. As a practical science, It consists in the relations that can be established with spirits. As a philosophy, it entails all the moral consequences that result from such relations. Let us walk together now. I have stated a number of things based on Herculano Pires and Kardec. Let's walk to the basics of philosophy and try to, find out what insights we together, incarnate and discarnate, by the way, because I understand that a lot of discarnated spirits are watching this talk as well, and see what insights we can obtain. We have a challenge here to understand, additional subtle meanings behind the teachings of Kardec. And let's do it together. We have to walk through some of the basic concepts of philosophy. Philosophy comes from the Greek. It indicates love of knowledge, pursuit of wisdom. Cicero said, study of wisdom is philosophy. Philosophy is nothing else. But wisdom is knowledge of divine and human causes. Cicero's definition. It is believed that this word was coined by the Greek philosopher Pythagoras around 580 BC. Who knows? By the way, this bust at the left is a bust of Pythagoras that currently is in the Capitolinus Museum in Rome. Historically, we must understand this because today philosophy has a different meaning. From Aristotle to the 19th centuries to the time of Kardec, all bodies of knowledge were called philosophy. The original work of Isaac Newton, the theory of gravity, was called Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, mathematical principles of natural philosophy. So before the 9th century, all knowledge was inside philosophy. For Plato, by the way, this is a bust of Plato on the left. That's another Greek philosopher. Philosophy can be summed up as an man's ability to use knowledge for his own benefit. Plato argued it would be useless to have the ability to turn stones into gold for those who did not know how to use gold. It would be useless to make immortal whoever did not know how to use immortality, and so on. Therefore, it's necessary to have a body of knowledge in which doing and knowing how to use what is done coincide. This is philosophy. This comes from the Dizionario di Filosofia in Italiano by Nicola Abbagnano. I don't believe it has been translated to English, so it's my free translation here. And I invite you to begin to analyze what you know of Kardec's work under the lights we are presenting here. Definitely, Kardec has given us a body of knowledge in which doing and knowing how to use what is done coincide. Manuel Pelicas Marcos, sometimes called Manuel Pelicas San Marcos, is a Spiritist philosophy. He discarnated in 2004. He's originally from Portugal, but came to Brazil. And he has a large body of knowledge, founded an institute of Spiritist philosophy. He tells us that philosophy provides the acquisition of knowledge that is valid and applicable to a given situation, and the use of knowledge to benefit human progress. Thus, philosophical studies should lead us to reflection that broadens our worldview, the wisdom of life, and that broadens as well our rational conception of the universe. Definitely, Spiritist science brings us that. Hence, philosophy is understood as the unique process that illuminates ignorance and transforms it into relative wisdom. The words of Manuel Pelica São Marcos. And what's a philosopher? I claim that we are, all of us that are watching this talk are philosophers. I myself and you that are watching. We are all persons who seek wisdom or enlightenment. And this comes from the Merriam-Webster dictionary. One who likes to study, to know, moved by the awareness of the ignorance inherent to the human condition. Someone who investigates principles, fundamentals, or the essence of the surrounding reality. So, I invite you all, incarnates and discarnates watching this, to put on your philosopher hat from now on. We are all philosophers. We'll all be reasoning about what will be presented here, and we'll be very selective on how we accept the ideas. I don't have a hat here, but you will try to imagine my hat on top of this headphone. And now I will do not a small parenthesis, but a little side talk. I have to present some concepts. Gnoseology, difficult word, is the philosophy of knowledge and cognition. We won't talk about gnoseology anymore, but I have presented here because epistemology will use it. What is epistemology? It's also study or theory of the nature and grounds of knowledge, but it's especially used with reference to the limits and validity of knowledge, when knowledge is valid. So shelf this epistemology on your mental shelf because we'll use it later. And again, bear with me this introduction. Metaphysics. What is metaphysics? The three next slides are here essentially to explain the meaning of metaphysics. If you were an ancient or medieval philosopher, we might have some here with us, you would have said that metaphysics was the study of things that do not change, of the first cause of things, of beings as such. Actually, metaphysics was one of four divisions of philosophy. One could classify the knowledge in the metaphysical body of knowledge maybe in 5 different kinds. Theology, that has to do with God, religion. Ontology, that has to do with existence, the being. Cosmology, that has to do with the universe. Anthropology, that has to do with humans. And axiology, that has to do with values. Giving a full slide to theology, it by definition means the study of religious faith, practice, and experience. But we should note that each religion has its own theology that is built according to interpretation of its masters. So, sometimes, due to the dogma, external cults, rituals, power plays, etc., theology, although it would be a part of a body of knowledge that is not design is not the correct word, but that's here to provide us clarification, sometimes they restrict knowledge instead of widening. So this is something we should be careful about. The other four common divisions of metaphysics, from the first would be ontology, that I would mention here, and specifically to clarify its meaning. Ontology is the branch of metaphysics that's concerned with the nature and relations of being, of existing. But the thing is, nowadays, metaphysics, the word metaphysics, is often used as a synonym for ontology. Even more than that, today, whenever you read metaphysics, you almost immediately absorb a exoteric bias. There is physics and there is metaphysics, and metaphysics is esoteric. So be aware of those two meanings so you're not preconceptuous when you hear metaphysics, okay? Cosmology deals with the nature of the universe. And I am sorry, but this is a 1 minute parenthesis. I always like to present this. This picture here is the image captured by Hubble. Is a famous image captured by the Space Telescope Hubble. It took days to get it. Always pointed in the same place while orbiting around Earth. It's a very narrow, if I'm not mistaken, it's like a 1 degree aperture in a place in the sky where you can see beyond our Milky Way, our galaxy. In this picture here, that was animated here on top, as if you were traveling inside, in between those galaxies in the deep field, you can count 1,600 galaxies. You can clearly see a spiral galaxy here, another spiral galaxy here, 1,600 or more of those in this little teeny bitty of sky. Galaxies may be larger than the Milky Way. I always like to present that because I think we Spiritists, we must have a notion of scale. There are over 1 trillion stars in the universe. This is the size of creation as we know it. So we should be, a bit humble. We have a lot to learn. Back to the slide, anthropology is the study of the human beings and their ancestors through time and space. In one of the classes I give sometimes on intelligence and instinct, I do a small anthropology section showing the origin of man. And axiology is the study of nature, types, criteria, values. It's essentially the study of moral and ethics, besides art and, forgot the word in English, and, well, besides art. Back to the topic, the philosophical knowledge could be divided according to its nature in spiritualistic or materialistic. Materialistic philosophy or materialism is the body of philosophy that view that all facts, including facts about the human mind and will and the course of human history, are causally dependent only upon physical processes. It means that the existence of matter for those thinkers is the only real fact. fundamentally, all things according to them are composed of matter, and all phenomena are the result of material interactions. You and myself as philosophers, and definitely the discarnated philosophers that are watching this, they are not materialistic philosophers. They belong to the school of spiritualistic philosophy or spiritualism. This is the characteristic of any system of thought that affirms the existence of immaterial reality, imperceptible to the senses. It applies to any philosophy accepting the notion of an infinite personal God, the notion of the immortality of the soul, and of the immateriality of the intellect and will. And I'm pretty sure we all belong to this current of thought. The codification, by the way, tells us that these three elements comprise the principle of all that exists: the universal fluid, the spirit, and God. So now we have some structure to defend to people that we are spiritualistic philosophers while talking about the Spiritist philosophy and Spiritist science. Let's switch to scientific knowledge now. As I have mentioned, science comes from the Latin scientia, and science, as we know, began only in the 19th century. Scientia also means knowledge. It's almost a synonym of philo. Anyway, scientia, science, must include necessarily a kind of knowledge that has a maximum degree of certainty. In a broad sense, science contemplates all systematic, theoretical or practical knowledge. Systematic here being the operational word. In a narrow sense, science is the way of acquiring knowledge by rational study and the use of scientific methods. We have to evolve further to be able to discuss and defend the term science used by Kardec in regard to rational study and the use of scientific method. Let's evolve together. Scientific knowledge is an ordered and coherent system of knowledge that aspires to objectivity, methodically investigates facts and phenomena, searching for their universal structures. Scientific knowledge tries to relate facts and phenomena to the universal structure so that it's possible to seek general laws that govern the function of those phenomena. I find all of that in Kardec's codification. Scientific knowledge's purpose is to study thoroughly the real objects experienced and to predict new facts. Prediction, correctly predicting new facts, is a central part of the scientific knowledge. And again, I think the codification fits into this description, but it's for you, philosophers watching, to have your own conclusions. Before going further, we will have a number of words to define. Philosophy and scientific studies and we could, bunch them together inside science, are carried out by methods adequately selected for the development of the research, study, work, or whatever they are aimed at, including spirit studies. What is method? Method is a word of Greek origin, again, that etymologically means a way or manner to pursue, a way to reach an end. That's what a method is, a way to achieve something. According to philosophy, a method is a way to obtain knowledge. Methodology would be a body, a set of methods, rules, and postulates, usually belong to a discipline. Difficult word now, dialectics. Come on, what are you here talking about dialectics? Dialectics is difficult. Many persons don't know, many people don't know its meaning. People don't know its meaning many times. Sorry about my English. It's also because its meaning has been modified along, with the passage of time, especially in the 20th century, and is being explored by some ideologies. Anyway, dialectics in its original meaning is nothing but the art of arguing, the art of discussing, the art of argumentation, of defending a position. Dialectics is nothing different from the Socratic method of argument, the practice of examining opinions or ideas logically, often by the method of question and answer, so as to determine their validity. I am pretty sure you recognize that being done by Kardec. Dialectic has been widely used by Kardec. We can do the Socratic method of argument in many ways. Probably the most known is Hegel's dialectic, or the Hegelian dialectic, that has three phases: thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, as shown in the picture to the left. The idea behind Hegel's dialectic is that you present a thesis, such and such. Then you say, well, if such and such was not true, or did not happen, or it was not like that, then ba 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 ba. If this does not make sense, the conclusion is that the original thesis is okay. It becomes the synthesis or the new thesis. Kardec has used it all over. Question 257, including question 222, that has been recently studied by João Korngold, who hopefully is watching here, by the SGNY, the New York Spiritist group. It's a very long question, if memory doesn't fail me, like 6-7 pages question, where essentially Kardec makes considerations concerning the plurality of existences, reincarnation. And he argues, if this was not so, then something, and this is clearly not logical. So we are getting more instruments to critically analyze and to critically defend to others the codification. I hope you feel empowered by this. Let's go on. The philosophical methodology is essentially dialectical, and it's based on experience. In philosophy, the search for truth is done mainly through argumentation, which must be anticipated by inquiry and followed by a reflection. Since the basis of philosophy is experience, and reality, its methods naturally set off from common sense, which is knowledge originated from the shared experience of individuals. So it's very correct to treat philosophical Spiritism, which is the knowledge originated from the shared experience of errant spirits who have testimonied things and have explained them to us. So it's absolutely correct. Classical tools of the philosophical method are observation, reading, questioning, interpreting. There's an extra I there. Sorry about that. And conclusion. These are the elements that provide the basis for the construction of the argument. The argument is the core of the dialectics. It's the core of philosophical debate. I hope that Danny from the SGNY group is watching, because remember we talked about this the other day. Argument. What is an argument? What is this core of the philosophical debate? Is any reason, proof, demonstration, indication, motive, anything that's capable of gaining accent, inducing a person to be persuaded or to believe on something. Cicero said that the argument is anything that gives faith, that gives credibility. Thomas Aquinas regarded argument as that which convinces the mind to assent to something. By the way, I couldn't resist placing this beautiful image of St. Thomas Aquinas by Fra Angelico. It is currently in Venice, part of the Collezione Vittorio Tini. Anyway, so we know that when we want to defend an idea, even a Spiritist idea, we should build an argument. And whenever people build arguments to convince us, to persuade us, we must be careful and analyze it well, philosophers that we are. Every argumentative process is only reliable when it has good premises that are valid, when the ideas are presented with clarity, when the data is reliable, and the conclusion is sound. Only then can we say that the argument is trustworthy. False premises lead to false arguments that present false conclusions. Be aware of that. We are presented the whole time with, twisted arguments, especially in this current time of fake news. So be aware. Besides all those four things, there are fallacies. Oh, be aware of fallacies. A fallacy is a type of incorrect reasoning that, despite its appearance of correctness, is wrong. And I have placed this illustration on the left to try to illustrate that, meaning this particular dog is doing the following reasoning. All cats have 4 legs. I have 4 legs. Therefore, I am a cat. Something that this dog clearly is not. So beware of fallacies. Fallacies are also known as sophistry or paralogism. They are not really synonyms. Some scholars make a distinction by saying that a sophistry is a fallacy with intent to deceive, unlike paralogisms that are does not have intent to induce a wrong reasoning. All of that to establish the basis and to allow us, philosophers, Spiritist philosophers, I hope, to be critical on their analysis and on our analysis and on our defenses. Let's skip to scientific methodology. The primary objective of scientific methodology is to systematically understand nature. By the way, I see there are a lot of questions popping up, but I think the subject is going to heat up in a while. So wait a few moments. The scientific method involves a question and a suggested explanation, something that's called a hypothesis, usually based on observation. That would be this. I'm not going into multiple scientific methods, but let's go into the basic deductive one that we learn in school. Usually an hypothesis is based on observation, followed by the careful design and execution of controlled experiments. Finally, validation, refinement, or rejection of the hypothesis. The scientific method, people, it was developed by thinkers including Bacon, Descartes, Peirce. And it has been credited with much of science's success in the last 2 centuries. Sorry, I talk too much, but anyway, let's go on. For science, it is fundamental to avoid misinterpretations. Only when scientists' hypotheses are confirmed, they enunciate laws, theories, or principles that are integrated into a coherent structure of knowledge and accepted by scientific committees as new paradigms, models, or standards. At least it should be like that. One of the general principles of the scientific method is correctability. On the left, there's a brief, high school level description of the scientific method. Observation, question, hypothesis, experiment, analysis, and conclusion. But regarding correctability, there are no absolute truths, only relative ones. As man acquires more clarifications, they are corrected. The fallibility of human knowledge is admitted by the scientific methodology and by science, and by Spiritist science, by the way, as no knowledge is infallible absolute. Kardec himself has told us that when scientific knowledge surpasses the knowledge that has been described in the codification, let's replace it. Fallibilism, thus, applies that assessments even to science's best entrenched claims, and here I include Spiritist sciences, best entrenched claims, and to people's best loved common sense views. And then we get again into epistemologic. Despite the difficult word, epistemologic break is central, I believe, to our conversation. This concept has been introduced by a French philosopher called Gaston Bachelard around 1940, if memory doesn't fail me. And here I cite Mary Tiles, that wrote, a work called Bachelard, Science and Objectivity, discussing Bachelard's idea. And essentially, the concept is science does not correct itself linearly. Science corrects itself through epistemologic breaks. First, Usually, there must be an epistemologic obstacle. You remember, epistemologic is the nature and validity of knowledge. So, when we have an epistemologic obstacle, it means something is questioning the validity of knowledge. This creates tension, and eventually an epistemologic break happens. And what is that? It's the replacement of one scientific theory by another. As new facts are discovered, new inventions, new instruments, new forms of investigation. Scientific thought has to break with common sense. And this is not easy. It takes effort, takes time. And that will eventually cause an epistemological rupture. Even I am getting in trouble with this word. Let's give you an example. And I'm going to waste here like a few minutes. Sorry about that, but maybe it will provide you with some enlightenment. There are innumerous cases of epistemologic obstacles and breaks in the history of science, the history of the human beings. I wanted to get an example that would echo on you guys. We used to be very happy, incarnated, working with Newton mechanics for a long time. We understood gravity, we understood the orbit of planets, we understood time. We were all very, very happy, and it all agreed to our common sense of the time. Oh well. Around 1860, a guy named Maxwell consolidated the laws of electromagnetism, clearly characterizing light as an electromagnetic wave similar to radio waves. And it was believed that, like sound waves that propagate to air, my voice here, light waves have to propagate through a medium. And they called that medium ether. Oh well, ether written like that, A-E-T-H-E-R in English. Several scientists theorized about ether, how it would behave, whatever, and it could be something static or something in movement. But it had to be all over the universe, including in the vacuum, because we can see the stars. So if the light of the stars reaches, it means it has propagated through vacuum, so there must be ether in vacuum. Michelson and Morley went about finding out about the ether, if there was ether wind or not. Anyway, they spent, guys, like 8 years on very meticulous experiments, because as the Earth travels around the sun and as the Earth turns around, if we have ether, we should be able to measure the speed of the Earth against the ether as it changes positions. And the experiment was very complex. I mean, it involved a piece of granite, huge, weighing tons, on top of a mercury tub, floating. Imagine granite floating on mercury. So that would be a stable basis for their interferometer. Anyway, not going too much into that size. This is called the most famous failed experiment, meaning they gave up. They couldn't measure a difference in the speed of light independently on direction. That was an epistemologic obstacle. And it took decades. There were other facts that come about that did not confirm measurements made in experiments. And then 1905 came up Einstein, this obscure guy living in Switzerland at the time, that said, the answer is, for people traveling in different speeds, time is not the same. Come on. If I'm riding my car, time for me is different from time from my wife, who is at the office? It can be. It challenges common sense. 1905. Then in 1915, if memory doesn't fail me, he said more. Gravity changes the passage of time. He said a lot of other things, but I'm focusing on time here. Depending on the force of gravity that you are subject to, time for you will be different from someone else. I say, come on, give me a break. I am on the 12th floor now, so time for me is different from whoever is walking the street right now. This violates the common sense. Bertrand Russell, he is a famous philosopher. He gave us advice in his autobiography, and one of his advice, I don't remember number 4 or number 7 was, do not fear to be eccentric in opinion, for every opinion now accepted once was eccentric. And that's the case of Einstein theories. It took years for them to be accepted, and ideology interfered a lot. There's a movie, I think it's on Netflix currently, called Eddington and Einstein. You should watch it because it shows the resistance of the scientific academia, especially in a moment before and during, actually, World War I, or they would say, how can we believe in what a German scientist is saying when we have Newton theory? You see how things get messed up with the power structures and ideology interfering in the knowledge, in our search for wisdom. Anyway, today, even though I still have trouble, with my watch and the watch of the guy on the street, everyday things have proved Einstein correct. For instance, GPS. You guys use GPS in your cell phones every day. My wife does not go to the grocery store without turning on the Waze. It's a vice. Anyway, GPS only works because it compensates for the relativity distortion of time. The satellite's up there in a low orbit and is traveling very fast. Because it's traveling very fast in relation to us, time shortens to the satellite. On the other hand, because he's higher up and we are here, high gravity, low gravity, due to the gravity, time for him shortens because he's subject to less gravity. And both those effects have to be taken into account for us to go to the market using GPS. The common sense has been broken due to the perception of new facts that are real and that slowly came into our reality in such a way that we cannot ignore them anymore. Isn't that great? Kardec tells us in the Gospel according to Spiritism. Yes, he talks about that in this book. Spiritism is the new science that comes to reveal to man, through irrefutable evidence, the existence of nature of the spiritual world and its relations with the corporeal world. Spiritism shows it to us no longer as a supernatural thing, but on the contrary, as one of the living and unceasingly active force of nature, like relativity, as the source of a multitude of phenomena that are so far misunderstood, and for this very reason, relegated to the domain of the fantastic, the paranormal. In the Spiritist Review, September 1863, the union of Spiritism with the philosophical sciences seemed to us really a great necessity for human happiness and for the moral, intellectual, and religious progress of modern society. It is up to science to study its scope and coordinate the general principles according to this new order of phenomena. I know now what you, philosophers, incarnated and discarnated, are thinking is coming next. Will the Spiritist revelation cause an epistemologic rupture? Or the question is, when will the Spiritist revelation cause an epistemologic rupture? Will it happen in this incarnation? I am 60-something. Who knows? My son is 16. Maybe not in mine, maybe in his. Kardec was very optimistic. On the left here, I did not reproduce on the slide, so I'm going to read it. He says in the Spiritist book, the same thing will happen regarding Spiritism, as has happened regarding all other new ideas that have encountered opposition. Scholars will yield to the evidence. One by one, they will accept Spiritist beliefs by necessity, as we do with GPS. Oh, guys, that's something I hope. Kardec tells us with Spiritism, a future life is no longer an article of fate, a mere hypothesis, but a future life becomes a material reality as facts demonstrate. Those who have described them to us have all been eyewitness to those facts. Remember, what is philosophy? Knowledge that comes from a body of people, the experience of a body of people. This is philosophical knowledge. Valid scientific philosophical knowledge. And there's a phrase that I reproduce whenever I have a chance. I love it. Here in the left, just as a curiosity, during the research for this class, I found what the 1883 translation by Colville of the Genesis. It's in the University of Michigan library, but thanks to the internet, we all can access it. It's in the site hathitrust.org. So if you guys are curious, go there and read it. It's not in the proper order, but it's there. And even in that translation, it's said, word by word, the future is no more a vague hope. It is a positive fact, a mathematical certitude. Whoops, I clicked the wrong thing. Sorry about that. I have to recover here. Good. But Kardec tells us in the Spirit's book, the true Spiritist doctrine is in the teaching imparted by the spirits. And the knowledge of this teaching is far too serious to be acquired in any other way than an in-depth and continuous study. And us, Spiritist philosophers, should try to do that. It's not enough for the human to know purely and simply. One needs to be enriched with moral values that make one more spiritual and transform one into a good person. We should all try to become good persons, good spiritists. The happiness of the future inhabitant of planet Earth will depend not only on knowledge, but also on moral improvement. And to finalize it, also from the Gospel according to Spiritism. The times have come, tells us Kardec, when the teachings of Christ will receive their complement, in which science, no longer exclusively materialistic, has to take into account the spiritual element, in which religion no longer ignores the organic and immutable laws of matter. These two forces, science and religion, leaning on each other, will march in concert and will give each other mutual conquers. And I do hope this happens soon. Thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you got insights from this. And keep your philosopher hat whenever you are studying Spiritism, whenever you are arguing with people.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you, Luis. Thank you so much. What an enlightening discussion. Trying to put that philosopher hat, but we're come to a few minutes, as I mentioned before, that we're open for some comments and questions from the audience. So let's see if we can find our first question, which says, Luis, thank you for explaining the basic concepts of philosophy. How can we understand the philosophical nature of Spiritism as a body of knowledge in which doing and knowing how to use what is done coincide with how we learn and practice Spiritism?
Oh, well, thank you. I don't know if it was João or Jussara, but coming from the U.S. Spirits Federation, probably is from one of them. And by the way, I always ask questions to them, so this is their way of. Well, for me, it's self-explanatory. Anybody who has read the codification will find a body of knowledge and the knowledge how to use it. Actually, it's probably the central body of knowledge that teaches us how to be moral persons, how to improve ourselves, how to speed up our route to advancement as spirits, as have been explained by other speakers in this series of talks. So for me, it's self-explanatory. I like also the mentioning here of the practice of Spiritism, because practice of Spiritism has two sides. Is our side of self-improvement, it's practical, but also whenever we participate on mediumistic meetings as mere workers there, in my personal opinion, we find enlightenment, because in the process of helping incarnate and discarnate in the process of learning, we get insights in a different reality. And those insights, they support our decisions, our behavioral decisions, our improvement decisions. In the end, our I have to switch English and Portuguese. Our oh boy, the word I missed the word. The opposite of blind faith is, help me, Marcia.
Rational faith.
Rational faith. Thank you. It enforces our rational faith.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Thank you so much, Luiz. So let's see
I
if we
think
have time. Yes, you did. So we have another question that says, what does philosophy tells us about listening to and even respecting the opinion of others, even if they differ completely from the spirit's fundamentals? For example, creationism, atheism, etc.
That's an excellent question. Our body of knowledge might have different facets, as a stone has different faces, and it remains the same stone. So it admits different perspectives. Not necessarily all those perspectives will hold true with passage of time and experience. I believe we can say that for sure most of them will not hold true as we evolve. So philosophy tells us that we have, with our philosopher heads, analyze all bodies of knowledge, looking for fallacies, looking for misinterpreted conclusions, as we have shown, and separating them, classifying them, and sometimes take many of those as possible good reasonings. Eventually, we'll have to adopt one. And again, we have instruments to argue our point, respecting the point of others, but of arguing our point, like Cicero trying to convince others. Cicero was a great orator. I wish I was Cicero so I could convince everybody of my beliefs. Unfortunately, I am not.
This is a plug, everyone, for reading about Cicero. Thank you. So we have another one, and it's a small question, this one. How do you think human science and spiritist science will converge?
Thank you. This is a great question. I would answer it if you had not asked it. It will happen abruptly, in my opinion. We have all signs now that science does not want to accept. That's the truth. I mean, it's not popular for a scientist to do research on life after death, to do research on spiritists. I mean, you don't get funding doing that. Try to propose to DARPA a study like that. Anyway, eventually those things will accumulate. They will become epistemological obstacles, and they are accumulating. Come on. But something will do that will be like, something will come, that will be like impossible to ignore. I don't know what will be. Maybe someone will discover a lens and will allow me to see all the errant spirits that are around me watching this presentation. Maybe someone will prove string theory and those 11 dimensions that are there, and something's gotta be there. Maybe, I don't know, something else very, very strong, either applicable or easily reproducible, will come about, and then things will change. And it will be fantastic.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. This is great thoughts for us to ponder. So we have another question. In an increasingly politically divided world, intolerance is much more prevalent than a safe environment for argumentation. How can the knowledge of philosophy help us become more tolerant?
Well, who am I to suggest how can knowledge of philosophy help us become more tolerant, especially in closed societies? And probably, I mean, it's obvious, my opinion, that knowledge is central, and our effort to learn and to reason with all different intelligence, not only rational intelligence. Those of us guys those of you guys who will watch or have watched my intelligence class. Anyway, I believe the acquisition of knowledge as a whole help us to be more tolerant. And it has to be knowledge that is open, knowledge that widens our vision of the world, not knowledge that restricts it to one particular sect or ideology. But I believe that's the limit of what I can say about this. I wish I had the power to make people want to learn more and to reason and to have their philosopher hats all the time.
Absolutely. That's a great call to action for all of us. I think we're coming to an end of our time together. Oh, we have one more. So, what are your own thoughts, Luis? When or how would the Spiritist revelation cause that epistemological rupture?
I don't know. I believe I answered that, but anyway, extending it. When traditional science performs an experiment that brings something up, or when something from outside the traditional science has to be recognized as valid. When this will happen, I don't know. In a certain sense, I wish it had happened already. But it's a wish, because I think I said it somewhere there. Humanity has so much to gain as a body of people, as Earth, to have a wider view of the nature of the universe, to understand more about the existence. I mean, I don't see a downside of this happening. I think it would be fantastic for the planet. And a good answer would be when we have when the planetary transition happens.
There you go. There you go. One way or another.
I escaped in a tangent.
Very good. Well, thank you. Thank you. Oh, we have another one. So sorry. Luis, how did your personal journey brought you to Spiritism, and what made you stay?
Okay, that will take a minute or two. I am a recent arrival to Spiritism, less than a decade. I was aware of the phenomena, of the paranormal phenomena. I have been seeing it, talking about it since I was like 10 years old. Had my theories, but Spiritism itself, I had a preconception of Kardec and such, so I had never read anything. I had Spiritist friends. They talked about me sometimes, but anyway, I have a very exact science background. I'm an electronics engineer by a very, very difficult school called ETA, similar to Caltech in the US. So very, very rational. And time went by. Eventually, years later, my daughter saw me kind of muddy, and she said, I think you should go to this place. And this place was a Spiritist center who did disobsession work? How do you say disobsession?
I would say that's a good word. Yeah.
Okay. And there I went, not knowing what was going to happen, essentially to please my daughter, who was like 18 or 19 at the time. And there was a presentation, talked about Kardec. I picked up a book. I read it, the Spiritist book, introduction. And, it spoke to me. I can understand this guy. This guy is reasonable. He makes sense. He talks, things in order. He argues. And I decided, well, I should learn more about where I am. And that's how I got started. I read codification. I had other books. I kept going back to that particular, to Grupo Fraterno. That's the center where I work in, just as a mere worker. And eventually I started to help them there, start to help in the Spiritist meeting, in the mediumistic meetings, the disobsession sessions. Eventually I started giving classes, and that's how it happened. So I believe a short answer would be by leaving aside preconceptions and reading the codification with an open mind. The codification, together with what I personally testimonied in maybe over 1,000 mediumistic meetings, have convinced me that it makes sense. And that's why I became a Spiritist. If that was the question, I don't remember the question. Yes. I got excited and
thank you,
lost
and
track
thank you
of
for sharing your personal journey. I believe there you go. We are at the end, and we have some thank yous. I would like to take this opportunity, among with all those who are here with us today in this live talk, to say very grateful. I would like to thank you, Luiz. Thank you, everyone who was able to watch this live talk. Those who have been following us, our weekly talks, please note that next Saturday, October 9th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, please don't miss Alex Alves, who will be speaking on the topic, Know Thyself. I would like to come to the end of our time together, and I would like for you, Luiz, to please say a prayer before we leave.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the kind invitation and allowing me the freedom to choose what to talk about. Let's calm down after this question and answer section and thank our mentors for the opportunity of being here and studying together and thinking together and wearing our philosopher hats together, and to thank all the benefactor spirits who allow us to improve, who defend us from bad influences, and to help us on this journey to evolution, to spiritual ascendance. Let us thank all our incarnated collaborators in our Spiritist centers, in Grupo Fraterno, in SGNY, in all the Spiritist centers in America, for the protection and the possibility of us doing this work and getting a little enlightenment in this incarnated journey. I always like to thank all those errant spirits who take the time to share with us their experiences and their ideas. So thank you so much, Emmanuel, and André Luiz, Emmanuel Filomeno de Miranda, and Joanna De Angelis, and all others that I'm not mentioning here. You perform such a wonderful service to us. Thank you so much. And thank you all that have watched this presentation and that will watch this presentation later. The incarnated spirits that are all around us, that are around Marcia, and that are in New York, and that are in Nashville, and that are in South Carolina and other states watching us. Thank you for watching. And thank you also, Incarnated, for watching. Thank you, João, Jussara, Travis, Clarette, Eric, good to see you here. And thank you, Lauren and Ana Rosa and Marcia, and all others. Thank you so much.